health of our employees and staff is extremely important for us, for the health of the company. And over the years, over decades, in India, that we have seen is that the focus on the physical health has improved, but the focus on mental health still has a long way to go. Just like there are gyms on every corner, I would like to see opportunities for people to discuss mental health in a unbiased way and zero stigma way. So I think unfortunately what I've seen is that our culture is so strong in this sense in the past, but over the last few decades it has, due to changes in the cultural segments of our society, mental health has taken a big beating. And the good thing now I see is that the youngsters actually are much more aware of it. So, and I know this because my wife is a leading psychologist herself, and 90% of people who come to her are in the range of 15 to 25 years, right? So I've seen that, and she does a lot of, basically what she's doing is social service in the psychology area. So I'm like I have a direct seat in front of the table as I see some of those issues, even though there is a lot of patient confidentiality. So I don't know who those people are, but I get to hear. The way it's changing is that the youngsters are also helping their parents understand, and I can see parents come because of their youngsters for taking help on the mental health front. So like Satya was saying, the two segments, I think I'm sure the young people would be able to help the elder people in the organization also understand the value of it, and we should utilize the younger people to become more of a role model to show that value. I'm really looking forward to this initiative because it's not only going to help the staff but also their families, which is the unique thing in our initiative, and it will then lead to more happy, more healthy employees, which will lead to better growth for our organization as well. So and it's part of the whole care philosophy that we have coined in Writer. So it's really good to see this initiative getting started at the auspicious occasion of Writers' Day and Founders' Day.
Thanks so much for that, Hemant. Gitanjali, I would love to sort of kick off a conversation, talk a little bit about what we do at INRR, but before that, address these important themes that you all outlined. I'm sure there are several here and also within the organization that are not just employees at Writers, but are also caregivers to perhaps elderly parents. They might be parents to young children who are themselves going through different stages of development, and also sort of everyone has collectively dealt with what COVID has done in terms of impacting our work and our life, but also some of the anxieties and fears that have come to the fore now in the context of people's day-to-day. So I'm sure you've seen it across different aspects of the organization. People didn't talk about it as much earlier, but there was certainly a need at that stage as well. It just went unaddressed. And now we are getting to a stage where there is organized infrastructure in terms of support partnerships to actually support that. So very happy to sort of kick off that conversation. Just really wanted to have a reflective discussion, if that's okay, and ask Sonika here to pull up a few prompt slides for us. Sonika, if you can, please, that'll be great. Just a quick introduction about myself. Dr. Amit Malik founded INRR, and he's not here. He's my co-founder, a psychiatrist by background. He spent 15-20 years working across leading mental health organizations in the UK UK before moving to India to build this sort of digital platform. And so one of the things that we're very committed to is building accessible mental health solutions. Hemant, you talked about across every street intersection there should be some support system available. Similar to that, the idea of using technology. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a social entrepreneur by backing. I've actually worked with writers, I think, in some avatar or the other. Previously, I was in the creative industries, and then I sold the art fair business and also the communications company to move on to mental health. And I joined Amit in 2019. I think the idea really, what excites us is to work with organizations, with ambassadors, with influencers, to be able to take mental health solutioning to the widest possible audience. And what we do as an approach is do that across different segments. So there is of course the digital platform itself and what we offer there in terms of tools, in terms of services. But there's also then going forward the plan to build offline setups where people can actually go get face-to-face support and so on. At the moment also our counseling is available across 8 or 9 languages and throughout the country. So if you just zoom out and look at the problem of mental illness, I mean, today everybody's talking about it. It's almost fashionable to talk about it, or it's a severe need. But if you think about it, it affects almost 1 billion people, right? It's WHO calls it a 1 in 4 problem. And yet most people never get any help, right? We know that there is a 90-95% treatment gap in this sector. So if you look at about 200 million people in India, as per a NIMHANS report, who was struggling with mental health conditions, most of them never ever get any kind of help. It takes the average person something like 4 to 6 years even to get to their first mental health appointment. And so in that context, an organization based on the philosophy of care for employees, for themselves, for the environment, and also by virtue of that for the community around them becomes incredibly critical. We know some of these statistics, but as we look at it and say, as a nation, we're looking at a $1 trillion loss due to sort of the economic, that's the economic impact or repercussions of not dealing with mental illness. We know 46% of the employees today struggle in some shape or form, and a whole range of issues, right? What we've seen in the COVID context is the severity of these issues has gone up, and the need therefore for support and intervention has become that much more critical. There used to be a time when people would focus on employee assistance programs purely with a productivity lens. I think that's hugely transformed now in this sort of pandemic era, where people are actually looking at the happiness quotient or the wellness of their employee base, and not just for the employees, but Hemant, as you mentioned, also for their family members. So I think these are all very critical aspects when you look at what you would call care and a care system that you are propagating, right? What care means for you as an organization and also as leads for your various teams. We know that in your sort of organizational objectives, you've talked about the caring for employees, for themselves, for the environment, various interconnected, interdependent aspects. So would love to understand how you're thinking about it when it comes to a care system, right?
A couple of initial thoughts to kind of just table it for the discussion. So one is this topic of mental health, how that kind of manifests in the white collar and the blue collar, I feel could be completely different because it also seems, and there are sufficient evidences that the white collar are in fact more vulnerable to mental health issues, and that could also kind of lead to certain more sticky stigma related issues, especially because of the fact that any mental illness or mental health issue is actually seen or looked down upon if you are a knowledge worker. So if it is something to do with mind, brain, knowledge, which is really the mostly the work of the white collar, and not so much about physical doing of things, then anything related to brain or anything related to mind immediately catches the eye of who is around you, and the organization, and immediately could be kind of taken in a very negative way to say that I mean, his contribution, one could kind of really feel that it can be kind of going down and going down fast and all of that, and also the manifestation of such issues on that individual is far more faster, and therefore it kind of gets into a kind of a whirlpool kind of a situation. That's what we are really doing here now. We recognize that mental health is an issue. I think the HR team, the leadership has empathized with the situation that the employees have gone through and have been going through, and therefore thought of this intervention. So if one would kind of really thread out the scheme of events, then one would consider the empathy being the number one characteristic, which leads to many solutions and resolutions, right? So
I think just to reflect, Amit, on the two things, there are three kinds of organizations. Those that actually penalize people for having mental health challenges and will probably use that as an opportunity to terminate their employment or do other things that are in that sort of classification. Then there are those who perhaps recognize it as a challenge, but have not really understood the role of the organization in that, and therefore they remain passive, right? They may therefore suffer collateral damage. Their employees might be suffering, but they don't really know what to do, and they haven't got to a point of really caring and trying to figure it out. And then there are those who actually understand that people spend most of their waking hours at work, and it is a large part of what their life is, but also what's going on in the rest of their life impacts them at work as well, right? So the idea of a vicious cycle versus a virtuous cycle is something that organizations that are typically empathy led do understand. And then the question becomes, what do we do as organizations? What do we do as leaders in those roles where we're managing teams and we have people reporting to us? Let's say if somebody reports an addiction problem or a suicide or self-harm challenge, how are we dealing with it, right? And what are the sort of tools that we're equipping, or even understanding that we're equipping ourselves with as managers and leaders to be able to empower our teams and others, right? So that's sort of something that I just wanted to reflect back with you. The backdrop we were just painting was, if you just look at India alone, look at a few years old data, 200 million people struggling, 70-80 million people with depression, 20-30 million people with psychosis and schizophrenia and severe conditions. And India, we've got 1/3 of the global burden of suicides, of depression and addiction. Now, if you look at the class of people that these mental health conditions are affecting, they're affecting everybody, right? There's 95% of the treatment gap is across classes and across geographies, right? We as INERAR, we are present in 540 cities across the country in terms of our digital access. We're doing therapy. We've got therapy offerings physically in 60 cities and remotely, of course, across the board in 7 or 8 languages. Would love to hear if anyone else wanted to reflect on what care meant for them, and also just to reflect as leaders on our idea of self-care. So empathy for others comes naturally in some organizations as part of the conditioning, but as leaders, typically there is a challenge when we look at self-care at the leadership cohort level and empathy for themselves. So would love to hear if there are any reflections, and you have some prompts on the screen if you know that sleeping is a challenge or work-life boundaries might be a challenge. I think Simon's...
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to contribute to the conversation. I think it's a very important area that we're talking about, and I think early on in my career, I certainly often saw many business leaders would think that the way to improve a company and improve performance was kind of increasing the pressure, right? Putting more pressure on the individuals to get them to perform better. And throughout my career, I learned that it's much like, I think, with how people perform at high levels within sport. There is, for everybody, this kind of optimal level of pressure for their best performance. And what I found is that there's differences between people, between cultures, between places on what is the right level of essentially kind of pressure and stress that people are under to perform at their best. And in many cases, I think businesses probably underestimate that they take people way too far beyond that peak for performance, right? So over the years, I've tried to kind of spend more time in getting attuned with how somebody is really feeling and how much bandwidth they have, and also how able they are in their personal time to kind of regulate and calibrate themselves so they are healthy, they're getting good sleep, they're getting good rest. I think it's an obligation for us, not just as a company, but of course business leaders, to know our people at that level, because ultimately that's how we get the best out of them, and that's how they get the best out of themselves, and that's how they're happiest too. So I guess in reference to Gitanjali's comment about the global perspective I might have from having lived and worked in various different places, I think it really depends upon the people, the company, the culture, but you need to know how to work with the different personalities that exist within your team. I think the mistake that's often made is kind of treating everybody the same, right? So that's what I would kind of add to the discussion from my experience on this area.
Great, thank you. That's very useful, and actually it brings me to another sort of reflection, which is that the same mental health conditions that we broadly understand and classify are all experienced very differently. And so what someone might come to you with, I'm feeling stressed or I'm not able to sleep, it may be an underlying condition of psychosis, it may be self-harming, it may be someone with PTSD. There are several things that add up, and what we know is that people tend to defer the solution or even defer talking about it. So there is a cycle of acknowledgement. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, I think this is very important, where we would like to really understand from our leaders again, what do you think is stressing the workforce? Satya, you want to go first?
Can't pinpoint on one single thing, Gitanjali. It is different for different people, right? Some people who are financially sound would find relationship issues. Some people who are happy at work may have a bad life back at home. So we can't say, right? All these could be contributors, to stressing the workforce. And it is not just the pressure of work that alone causes, concerns with an employee, right? It is also about what happens back home for him, what happens along with his colleagues, how is he behaving. So there are quite a few things. I can't straightforward say, this is one reason why our workforce is stressed. Okay. Right? Pandemic for sure. Pandemic is a kind of one-off reason. But if I keep pandemic out, the rest of all the reasons are really the stress factors for the workforce. Gitanjali, I think the main point that we all need to understand is not about the people whom we have identified and who we all know that they need support. But how about that group of people whom we have no control, and the self-awareness, neither any one of us can figure it out that they're undergoing some stress. That's the critical group. And if we have some sort of methodology or some game that can be played and figure out who are really under stress, that's the group that we need to address. The potential group that can really become unproductive maybe in months to come or in quarters to come. That's the group that we should be very keen to recognize.
That's a beautiful point. That's a pertinent point. I think, Neha, you could address that. Is that, usually we've seen this in society that, we hear that this person really suicided, and everybody is then in shock that, he seemed to be absolutely normal and what happened here, right? And of course, we don't really want those extreme dire kind of situations or outcomes for anybody, right? So I think that's a great point that Satya's brought to the fore, is how do we make sure that we're really reaching out to the ones who need this service the most?
Yeah, and there is a reason why alongside COVID, this has been called the silent pandemic, because we have seen a huge increase in the amount of mental health cases and the severity of those, right? These are also conditions that you can try and keep disguised or keep under the wrap for some time, right? And people do that for reasons of shame and stigma and denial, whether it's for themselves or with their family or in the workplace, right? And so early intervention is really the key. Prevention is better than cure. Most certainly applies to mental health. We've had at INRR, we've had over 7 lakh people take our assessments, which are really early testers, right? Just give you sort of early testing markers. You can gamify it or you can run it as an assessment. It's part of our employee program as well, to know what is your happiness score, what is your stress score, if you have issues with relationships or sleep issues, to be able to really get a sense at an individual level, and for the organization to get a sense at a cohort level of what are some of the challenges, right? And so we will of course be offering all of that, and the tangible ways in which that can happen are all part of what we will actually do. The key things to recognize are really sort of, as it's mentioned here, creating an emotionally healthy workplace culture, which means not just the lip service that somebody might have or saying this is important, we should do it, but really owning it at a leadership level. Some of what you've echoed here are thoughts and ideas that will encourage people. Going one step beyond that, we see that open expression and vulnerability at a leadership level goes a long way in really helping people feel safe, because they might know that you've got an employee program and you're doing it perhaps to increase productivity, but how do they know that they can trust that they are not going to get fired the minute they come and talk about it or something like that, right? So
I think Hemant can really tell us we're not doing this for productivity.
Yeah.
I don't think that was what we were thinking about, right, Hemant? I think it's just about being there. And every time we're talking about this, every time Hemant also brought this up, I was thinking about omnipresent. We say the characteristics of God, right? So it's just being omnipresent for our employees and just a click of the button away.
So see, one of the biggest factors which actually shows that this is not related to productivity is that any investment that an organization makes is always linked to ROI, right? And we have one of our CFOs present here, who would always look at okay, if you're investing 5 lakh, 10 lakh, 20 lakh in any new initiative, what is the ROI of that? For this particular initiative, we are not discussing any ROI, right? And that, I think that is what really shows that the organization is not looking at this initiative as a return on investment initiative. It is a core, care for our employees kind of initiative, because we know that this is an issue which has to be addressed at the core, and the organization has to be empathetic towards our employees. So and whatever benefits come out of it in terms of healthy, happier employees will anyway lead to more benefits for the organization, but we are not measuring it, right?
It's a byproduct.
So that's the number one thing, right? The second thing in terms of being non-judgmental, is mainly is that HR is closely involved in this initiative to ensure that I haven't gotten into details of the processes, but obviously it has to be anonymous. The immediate managers or the chain of the command doesn't need to know what those issues are of those particular employees. It's between that employee and the counselors from your organization who will talk about these issues, right?
Yeah.
So and the only thing we get is kind of a report of and Gitanjali, I think you can get into details of what those are, but obviously there are processes in the organizations which ensure HR will implement to ensure safety and anonymity.
Sushil, you want to really talk about it from the parlance of ROI, and I think Sunil, who is our CEO for Writer Safeguard, no matter what initiative we take to Sunil, he'll say, you don't bother about the cost, you just tell me how beneficial it is to my employees, right? I think that's the philosophy that Sushil can also probably echo here. Sushil, you want to kind of put in 2 bits?
Yeah, surely. Neha, our business is having almost 10,000 plus employees, and an average age of that group is about 30 years. Out of them 10,000 employees, almost 90% plus are blue collar employees. And these blue collar employees, their education level is anything between 10th or 12th pass. Most of them are coming from a slum or slum like areas, wherein they are having different challenges, going through different strenuous family pressures, and similar issues they are having when the working conditions are there, because we are in a cash management business. We are transporting cash across the country. We are managing almost 25,000 ATMs and similarly 25,000 cash pickup points. They are always on the bike or on the vehicle, which vehicles are normal. It's not AC vehicles or having sophisticated vehicles, and continuously having a pressure of cash, as they are carrying a huge cash in any vehicle at any given point in time. At least minimum 10 lakhs to 5 crore rupees of cash is there. So the work pressures are there. They have to ensure that the safety of the cash at any given point of time. As they are coming from a slum area, their understanding levels, their ability to take understand the various new things is very limited. We have to continuously try to educate them, help them in addressing their various issues. They are always in some financial needs because most of the family members are dependent on them. As they are in an age group of 30, many of them are recently married guys. Their family pressures are significantly high. So understanding these things during the COVID period, we launched various initiatives to address the various psychological, mental health issues of the employees. One of them is we tied up with an SBC3, which is a government non-profit organization. They provided support on how we can address the issue on employees' mental stress, how we can energize them, how we can motivate them during this period to overcome various stress levels. They are having a financial crisis. We came out with various programs to address these issues. Like we started a helpline to provide them help to identify a hospital bed for their family members if anyone is impacted with COVID. We try to help them by providing aid to source the medicines which were in a short supply during that period, to see that how we can release their stress level at that point of time. Apart from financial pressures, they are having a various number of family issues which are very, very critical and important for them, and that result into various issues. So we have to continuously help them address their challenges. White collar employees also have equally different challenges. Yes, because the blue collar employees, no doubt, we are having 90% plus employees. About less than 10% employees are white collar. They have different challenges. As every organization is having white collar employees challenges, similar type of challenges we may be having in case of white collar. But I feel that for me, more important is blue collar employees, which is really a bread earner for the organization. During the COVID period, which is really serious, there are the family pressures not to venture out for doing anything. Those employees came out of their homes, carried out the work during the COVID period. And that is very, very important for us, because otherwise it would have been difficult for us to survive during that period. And definitely need various different types of support to see that how we can address their challenges. Tremendous amount of mental stress is there. Huge stress levels are there. So let's see how you can help us on that thing. What are the solutions you can provide us on that thing?
So Vivek, since you've really not been able to contribute much because of, I guess, connectivity issues, but if you want to kind of tell us about, I think yours is the most vibrant lot, right? With the entire technology guys working on a startup kind of a culture. So you want to just tell us your views?
Because we are a startup and because we are bootstrapping. Number one, so finances are very, very limited. We don't have the money to do a lot of things. Number one. Number two, when we set out, maybe about 5 years back, pretty much it was all about, the team was hoping that the stuff that we were conceiving and it would evolve in a year's time would create magic, and if it doesn't, nobody knows what's going to happen. So there's so much unsurety about the future, right? In a situation like that, it is extremely difficult to motivate people to believe in a vision, just an idea, and make them believe that this idea is going to fly, and keep them motivated for almost as long as it takes for it to see initial results. Constantly there is this whole unsurety about what's going to happen. Will this fly? And then coupled with the fact that you're working with very limited budgets, you don't have the luxury to do things, and therefore obviously it causes a lot of stress between the team members, because you're trying to expect a lot of result with very little inputs, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of expectations, and sometimes the team feels that we're not really being realistic about expectations, and there's a huge amount of pressure basically coming from two fronts. One is the fact that we're bootstrapping, and the other is that we are on an innovation journny, and innovation, you never know unless it really flies that it has really succeeded. So these are the two big challenges that the edge company is facing, and whatever solution that you would propose, I don't know what that is, but if it can address these two scenarios, then I think it should be useful.
Great. I think that's what we should be able to address. Neha, you want to kind of give a response to Vivek?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Vivek, you touched on various points, and we did talk about some of these before. Sonika, if you want to just pull that one screen up. I think the idea is to look at it in a 360-degree kind of way. So I'll be brief and quick about it, but our approach really is to be able to put the users and put the employees first in the driver's seat of their own recovery journey, to be able to commit to them a journey of anonymity and confidentiality, but yet providing the best kind of support, and giving them the optionality of doing different kinds of support at different levels, right? Not everybody's needs are the same, and not everybody wants a solution for it the same way, right? So broadly speaking, the sort of 360-degree integrated approach that we're talking about includes, of course, the app that we have, which has a whole series of assessments, what different people are experiencing, if somebody has stress, if they have relationship problem, if they have anxiety, if they have depressive problems or addiction problems, then they have a whole bunch of assessments that can help them figure out what that is, right? Simple questions that can tell you, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now, etc. So there is those assessments. Then there are personalized plans that come out of that if you have stress, okay, you do these activities, you do these tools. We have about 400 pieces of content. There's lots of activities and tools. There are mood trackers where you can say how you're feeling today, so you can yourself reflect, and get a sense of how you're doing. And there are newsletters, of course, that we have that are providing that content, right? So assessments I've already talked about. Then, of course, there is the one-to-one therapy, which are the counseling sessions that people have available to them. These are in all these local languages, Telugu, Bengali, Punjabi, Malayalam. To your point, when you were talking about different kinds of blue-collar workers, the comfort of talking in your own mother tongue is much greater, and then talking in Hindi or any other language. And so that's why it's important to work in many languages, and we provide this support. We see a great uptake. In fact, as compared to a traditional EAP offering, we see a 8 to 12 times greater uptake. And the reason for that is because we are creating a holistic solution, so that we are not just stopping at offering somebody a therapy session and saying, it's your wish if you take it or not. There is a cyclic effort of constant prompts, constant nudges, talks like these. I mean, I've done a similar talk with Amazon India team. I've done a similar talk with Google Asia Pacific team, just all in the last few months, but several others also, where we talk to leadership cohorts to say, what can you do to make mental wellness a part of the core culture of the organization? What can leaders do about it, etc. So all of that comes together. The psychiatric support, of course, for severe cases, if there's need, then they are available on the same platform, so it becomes easy to access. And we have a whole menu of webinars.
So only one input which is coming to my mind when we discuss about mental health issues is, the degree of overdose of digital mediums that we might use. To what extent we should be using those digital mediums, because at times I feel that we are so much surrounded on digital mediums that itself becomes the source of stress. And I can kind of understand your solution comprising of a lot of apps and a lot of mood trackers and all of that, all on the fingertips. But there is nothing like a personal touch. There is nothing like a shoulder to lend when somebody is feeling that low. There's nothing like just a half an hour chat or a 45-minute chat or a personal meeting. So I would definitely recommend any solution that we think for writer, if it is suitably kind of having a fair mix of physical medium led implementations. Of course, digital can be used for convenience sake and all of that, but let not digital be overdriving the entire implementation of these initiatives. More and more physical stuff. I think today pandemic has shown that how much we kind of miss the old world, right?
Simon, any closing comments from you? We would like to really hear.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative, given the fact that the staff within the relocation business naturally are going to be under everyday stresses of work and life, which is naturally probably being compounded by the pandemic. And as I think we've discussed here, that this new support is providing it in a form that's convenient for them, in many cases quite anonymous, and it has the full support of senior leadership too. So I think that the other key piece which Hemant pointed out is that the purpose of this isn't focused on trying to drive a particular business objective. It's about kind of human outcomes, right? And really demonstrating that we talk a lot about care within our organization, but this is really about putting that into action that I think employees will deeply appreciate. So yeah, I think it's a great initiative. I think it's well thought through, and I think it'll be well received, because I think now we're at a time more than ever where I think people need this nourishment and support. So thank you.
I really want to thank each one of you who's been on the panel here today. I think it's a concept, it's a good start, right, Neha? I guess there are some questions that we've realized today, but we will be answering those. And I think, like you mentioned, this cannot be just one-time talk, right? This will have to be something that we'll have to engage with the leaders time and again, and hopefully it'll percolate, over time. So thank you everybody for your time. Thank you, Neha, Sonika, Rohan, Tanushree. Thank you so much for steering this today.